say every 500 shirts that are manufactured, one of them is lost as fiber pollution during the manufacturing process. But think about all of like the abrasive and the abrasive actions in the washing, or even when we're creating our fabrics of fleece, it might be brushed. I mean, there are fibers shedding all over the place. So during manufacture, certainly during our use, and sometimes you'll see the sun shining through the window, and in the air there are small fibers, right? So our carpets, I think polyester is everywhere, synthetics are everywhere. It's in our carpets, it's in our window coverings, it's in our bedding, not just the clothes we wear, it's all over. So while we're using them, small fibers are shedding.
Welcome to Clothing Culture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitker. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward and discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Culture is produced by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience. Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. Today, we're continuing our trend and having conversations in the realm of sustainability. Not too long ago, Bret came to me elated because he found what you called, Bret, the Holy Grail.
It is the Holy Grail, in my opinion.
In this polyester problem that really
bigger than that, synthetic problem, because it addresses both poly and nylon today, and hopefully other substrates soon.
Right. So we've had a lot of conversations talking about the poly challenges, and in this discovery of this Holy Grail solution, it came to light that this solution was founded by a friend of yours, Bret.
An old colleague from many years ago. That was really interesting. Yeah, I think we had posted something. I had come across this. I was really fascinated after going through as much detail as I could find on this. There wasn't a lot of depth and detail, but I kept looking at it and saying, is this possible that all of this talk that we've been having, that the industry, frankly, has been having forever, that, microparticulates and poly filling landfills for, 300 years plus, and, dealing with all these things, that there's a solution out there. And frankly, there has been a solution out there.
Yes.
A little bit of a secret for a while. And the conversation always been, we can't solve it at the consumer recyclable level. I think that's just a big political game. It never solves anything. It has to be solved at the source. And this group, I think, has done it.
Yes. So we welcome to the table this longtime friend of yours, Bret, Andrea Ferris. Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us. And as we mentioned, she is the founder of this incredible company called CiCLO. And we're going to kind of talk about this amazing innovation that is really starting to make some waves in the market. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. So good to be here. I really appreciate it.
So, Bret, you had mentioned that this incredible technology had been around for a little bit. Let's circle to that in a little while. I would really like for us to just build a foundation for our conversation in laying some of the land of this poly and synthetics problem. There's some key challenges that these textiles bring, of course, of which, Andrea, you've created a solution. But let's help people understand the true challenge of these synthetic fabrics.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can share with you just a little bit of our history and kind of like, what was the problem we were trying to solve from the beginning? What did we identify to get where we are here today? And I think we have a pretty interesting story. It's a pretty interesting story, yes. Well, so our story actually dates back to like 12 years ago. And, as you've been saying, like, sometimes people think that we're new in the market, but we're not. And so go back all the way to like 2012. And, Bret, we were doing some work together, but I was actually working on the McDonald's uniforms program, which is a huge textile program. It's almost all polyester. And I'd been managing that program at that point for about 8 years. And we were trying to do all kinds of things in the way of sustainability, actually. Like we were trying to recycle the textiles. It was impossible at the time. We were looking at how do we remove poly bags from them? How do we make the products that we're making better than they are today? And one of the things we were using was recycled polyester. So these were all good starts. But really what kind of prompted this whole thing is that we realized that even if we're using, say, recycled polyester, the materials that we're using were really polluting the environment. And so we just had this idea, like, how can we make a better polyester for this McDonald's uniforms program that we were managing? And, I'm actually not a scientist by background.
But you play one on podcasts.
I play one on podcasts, and I've learned a lot over the years.
Yeah.
And I do think, even as it comes to the innovation side, I think that not being a scientist and being so green, actually, at that point, I didn't even know how polyester was produced. Mm-hmm. I was really looking at things, say, like fabric forward. So I think being so green was actually helpful because I didn't see anything as impossible. So, I had this idea, okay, well, plastic can be biodegradable. And if we have to be using plastic in these textiles, which we do, right, because it's available, it's affordable, it's super high performance, then, let's see if we can figure out how to make it biodegradable. And so, again, I was working at a uniforms company, and the guys who own that are now my business partners, but super entrepreneurs. And, when somebody brings a good idea to the table, they're like, great, let's run with that. Let's figure it out. How are we going to get that done?
Well, that's
so
great.
That was kind of how it started.
Yeah. And you're right. Working on a program that is that large, that you do have the opportunity when solving a solution for something that has those many units, now you're starting to make impact. When we look at some of the statistics, currently 60% of the textiles made for apparel are in these synthetic fabrics like polyester and nylon.
And plan is that they're going to go up to 85%, based upon all these challenges with cotton.
Right, absolutely. And as we know, these materials don't have the same rate of biodegradability that natural fibers do. 500 years are some of those estimates in a landfill for polyester nylon to break down in a landfill. And
it breaks down. It's not really biodegradable even then. It breaks down into microparticulates and getting smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm, right. So there's some real challenges to overcome when battling against the desirability of the performance of these fabrics, but then the long-term impact of what they contribute to our world. Some of the other challenges I've read on your website are related to the shedding of polyester. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So if we think about almost all of our textiles, almost all of our fabrics shed, right? So they're shedding when we're manufacturing them. There was a study that was put out by the Nature Conservancy who did a report with Bain maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And they actually called out that for, say, every 500 shirts that are manufactured, one of them is lost as fiber pollution during the manufacturing process. But think about all of the abrasive and the abrasive actions in the washing, or even when we're creating our fabrics, a fleece, it might be brushed. There are fibers shedding all over the place. So during manufacture, certainly during our use, and sometimes you'll see the sun shining through the window, and in the air there are small fibers, right? So our carpets, I think polyester is everywhere, synthetics are everywhere. It's in our carpets, it's in our window coverings, it's in our bedding, not just the clothes we wear, it's all over. So while we're using them, small fibers are shedding. And then while we're washing them also. So, and that is pretty well studied at this point, especially the washing, because it's an environment where it can actually be measured to some extent. There are statistics that say that one load of laundry can release up to 18 million of these tiny fibers from textiles, right? And we don't really see it in our washing machine as much. But, think about even in the dryer. Every load of laundry that you run has a huge amount of lint that comes out of it, right?
Right. Oh my gosh.
So these are tiny fibers, and if they're polyester, or nylon, they are plastic, and just like plastic bottles that wind up in the environment, they, don't biodegrade, basically.
Right.
And even though there are estimates that say, okay, well, maybe plastics will take 400 years to biodegrade in different environments or whatever, nobody really knows for sure.
Right.
We haven't had plastic for that long, and none of us have been on Earth that long.
That's right.
So we know that there can be like very, very small amounts of biodegradation in the environment, but, tiny amounts. It's very hard for microorganisms to digest plastics. So that is, those numbers are just,
it's a real
we always say
challenge.
practically forever. I mean, you have forever chemicals and you kind of have these forever fibers.
Yep.
Yeah. So you decided to put your scientist hat on and create this new solution, this nature-based solution. How did you even go about this?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing I did, because, we were doing this to solve our own need. We were not thinking, let's create something and create another company and be where we are today. So the first thing we did was we just looked around to see, was there something already in the market that could solve for this problem, where we could have something that left our textiles as durable as we needed them to be, but also biodegradable, once they wind up as pollution in the environment. And what I found during that time is that biodegradable plastics certainly have a science behind them, but that there was nothing that was specific to the needs of textiles. So when I'm talking about like the needs of textiles, I knew that we needed some kind of chemistry that was going to work in our existing supply chains, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that
critical
huge, so it had to work in existing supply chains. Again, the durability piece was so important. I mean, we could not introduce something that was going to make a lesser product. That would be, a non-starter there. So the durability had to be affordable. So, we had to be able to control what the cost was ourselves, not be at the whim of any other manufacturer. Had to be safe. So that means I had to know exactly what are these different chemicals in here and how is it, causing the biodegradation. And then, really to have a product that is truly viable, it has to be available all around the world because the program that we were working on didn't have one supply chain, it has multiple suppliers. And over the years, of course, supply chains change as well. So we knew it had to be something that could be available around the world. So, we really just kind of set out to do that on our own. We did a lot of our own initial research on like what kinds of things can activate a biodegradation mechanism. And then we hired a chief scientist, and he came from a cradle-to-cradle background. He's a chemical engineer. And we assigned him with the task. We said, hey, here's where we're at today. Here's what our knowledge base. Let's, work together to develop formulations that we think can be added to polyester to maintain durability and also make it biodegradable. And that was really how we did it. We looked at like 15 different formulations, and all along the way, we had to consider things like, well, what spins into yarn effectively, right? Mm-hmm. You can't have an inefficient yarn spinning process because that would drive cost up. Suppliers would ever work with us. So it had to be efficient in spinning. We had to make sure that there was no dyeability issues, durability
no reduction
issues
in
in the
tensile
end.
strength. You had to maintain
Exactly.
tensile strength. Yeah.
Exactly. So, we've had to do studies also to make sure that there's no unintended consequences of, say, a finished fabric that's been redeveloped with CiCLO. We had to make sure that there was no additional microfiber shedding. I mean, it had to be just as durable. And then, of course, the biodegradation studies. So, we looked at like 15 different formulations through all these different processes. And it was really once we saw full biodegradation in third-party lab studies, which was about 3.5 years in a lab, where the owners of the uniforms company said, wow, this is amazing what we've developed, and we should spin off a separate company, bringing this to market as a technology for the entire textiles industry. So we spun off a separate company around late 2016 and actually launched as the brand CiCLO in 2017. So we've been in the market for a while, but really where we spent our early days was building this infrastructure so that CiCLO is available through supply chains all around the world. So that
I'm
means,
amazed at how quickly you actually accomplished it. I mean, this is a huge task.
In R&D, it was about 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still
2012 to 2016.
We have interviewed, we have talked to a number of different people about this subject, and there's all these people that are coming up with new versions of bio-based poly or bio-based synthetics. They tout about this, but there's never been anything to scale. It's always been, to your point, kind of conflicting with supply chain needs. It's just no one has ever come up with this, and the fact that and I'm sure there were a lot of trial and error, but it seems like you picked exactly the right group of people to solve this. And for the purposes of today, you are a unicorn. I mean, this is not something that's, you don't have a ton of competition out there. There's a lot of people out there that talk about different aspects about how to reduce, normal poly, but you've actually built it in pellet form to manage it at source. Building it into an existing supply chain. The competitors out there, there's nothing close at all that I've seen. I mean, there's people that may tout some solutions, but after you do a little bit more thorough study, you're not really sure whether they've got that fully baked or not yet.
Yeah, this is true. And I do think that there are some really amazing materials coming to market, like these bio-based and biodegradable polyesters, PHA, National Renewable Energy Labs, NREL, are working with the North Face on some innovations around that. But to your point, I can't even envision how long it's going to take for those things to actually scale and go beyond, say, a capsule program.
That's the issue. When you ask them about how many metric tons, and you need millions of metric tons, they're talking about tens of thousands, or, and maybe the war is won by a bunch of little troops on the ground doing it. But, I believe that the issue is so large that it needs something that can be, rolled out at scale quickly. We've talked about in previous episodes that, statistics are we're going to use this is a crazy conversation because it's physically impossible. There are people that we're going to use the resources of 2 Earths by 2025. And, there's all these conversations.
That's right around the corner.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all these conversations about, things that are urgent. And, we need an urgent answer. And again, I don't want it to sound like an advertisement for CiCLO, but it is an advertisement for CiCLO because I want people to get on board here. This is something that can change the world and move the needle quickly. And in the absence of all these other things, other people figuring out something to do at scale, this is something that every organization that is doing synthetics should be taking very seriously. That we don't have 5, 10, 15 years to sort this out. As I was traveling in Africa, and when rain would rain into these villages and nothing would soak into the soil because the soil was so full of plastic, that's not going away. That's not going to change. We need an urgent answer very, very quickly. And even when we were dialoguing with different bio-based companies, the natural conclusion that you have with almost all bio-based is, they're all biodegradable. I was shocked to find out when I asked, well, tell me about the biodegradability. We haven't really sorted that out yet. So you're using natural bio-based to create the equivalent of poly, but then you're repeating the same issue about biodegradability yet once again. There was just a number of organizations that touted bio-based, but still hadn't managed the biodegradable issue. And of course, I brought up that you should partner with CiCLO if the chemistry would work out well enough. That's the additive. And, we just keep coming back to the urgency and the need, and you've got the solution. Why did you keep it? And this is a tough question. Why did you keep it secret for so long? I feel like you've kept it secret.
Mm-hmm. I know you feel like that, but we actually have not kept it secret. We've really spent our time building out the global network of certified manufacturing partners. So those are polyester and nylon fiber and yarn manufacturers who can actually supply the CiCLO technology. And honestly, that's not that easy if you think about it. So
No.
here we are, a brand new company, and we want somebody to take this master batch that we've created and run it through their process. The only reason that people spoke to me in the beginning is because we had the McDonald's uniforms program behind us. It's hard to get gigantic manufacturers of polyester to say, yeah, I'm going to stop and I'm going to listen to you, startup, who doesn't have a customer yet, and run my material. So, it was really a matter of like getting these suppliers on board. And then even once you're proven as like, okay, you're not going to gunk up my system. Okay, this works. That like, then they say, well, I need a customer. I don't want a small customer. No one's running, small amounts of fiber at a time. They need big customers. So we really had to be working kind of both ends of the supply chain, all the way from the manufacturers of polyester to the end brands. And that's where we've spent our time. So now, even though you think we've been keeping it secret, we have large relationships. So it is used in, say, the McDonald's uniforms program, of course, which we created it for. But Hanes Brands is also using it. And they did a big launch with Champion, which you can see that they're transitioning their polyesters over to it. And they're not capsule programs that we're looking at, because we have no business if we have a capsule programs with a bunch of different brands. We might have a great marketing story, but we have no business, and we would go out of business.
And that's where bio-based stuff is today. It's a bunch of little capsule programs. People are kind of ticking the box on sustainability. It's not really turning the tide.
Yeah. And that was just never our objective from the beginning. We really said, like, let's figure out how can we truly make the biggest impact in terms of sustainability when it comes to polyester. So, we also work with Target. And so a lot of the relationships that we've built, these are enormous brands that we've been working with for many years on the vetting. And so they're, doing all their own due diligence. I kind of joke sometimes, I feel that we may be the most heavily vetted technology ever to hit the market. And every brand, has their own kind of way that they want to do the vetting of it. But, we were really getting big commitments from large retailers to be able to move the needle and building the infrastructure behind it over these years. And in 2025, we are coming out with a nice new elevated brand, and you'll see more of us in the market. But if you don't build the infrastructure to make it available everywhere, again, it's just a pretty marketing story. And we see a lot of those.
Yeah, you do. And I probably underplayed the complexity, but the anxiousness of seeing this everywhere, ubiquitous everywhere, probably drives that conversation a little bit. And I know you well enough in our conversations to date to know that some of this was also vetting on your part, that it was so important to you. And I even saw you at the textile show that we were just at, where you were very conscious about what you said, how you said it, the details behind it, because we just launched a podcast this week, I believe, about the challenge with greenwashing and how everyone would rather just not put their toe in the water for fear of being called out by something imperfect. And, in the podcast and in my dialogue about this journey to sustainability, just like our journey on industrialization, the journey of humankind on the earth, it's messy, right? There's never a direct line. You don't go from nothing to something. There's always these kind of trial and errors. And we have to have some patience for organizations that sincerely try to move the needle on sustainability and realize that along that path, there will be things that will not come to fruition or not meet the overall requirements of sustainability to the way that people want to kind of perceive them. And we have to have this openness to say, look, as long as they're trying, there are people that are deceiving people intentionally to drive margin and profit. Those are the ones that you have to be very black and white on. But there's just this mass of people today that are so scared about stepping into this for fear of something not particularly working out real well.
Backlash.
Backlash that's slowing our progress. And, I think it's important that we give you the opportunity for you to kind of speak to the detail and the intentionality that you had along the path to ensure that this is working the way that you are talking about. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say when it comes to the marketing of sustainable materials, I mean, we have been meeting with hundreds of brands over the last 7 years, right? And I've actually seen a transition in the way people are thinking about marketing their products. When we first came to market, there were definitely brands who wanted to come out with some big statement around biodegradable synthetics. And they wanted to be able to label their products with biodegradable and really just, they really wanted definite answers. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to say this is 100% biodegradable in every environment, those kinds of things. And we'd say, wait a second, we need to take a step back here. This is a solution for unintended pollution. We don't know where it's going to end up. We need to be careful about what actual claim we put on the end product. And that, I would say, hindered our growth in the beginning, conservative claims. And it is completely different now. Now, people are like, I want the most conservative claim. I want something that I feel comfortable putting on a tag, and it doesn't have to be some grandiose marketing message. I need it to be substantiated with testing and data on the back end. And, marketing messaging is going through legal teams. I mean, sometimes legal teams of a dozen people to make sure that we feel good about putting that on an end product. And that's how we handled it from the beginning. And I'm just going to keep going back to we were our own customer. Yep. So for instance, the claims that can go on an end product that's using a CiCLO polyester or nylon are really about the reduction of synthetic microfiber pollution in the environment, right? Because the benefit is once it gets into the environment, we know that it can biodegrade just like wool would biodegrade in the environment. And that is the claim. And, we took a lot of time in developing what is it that we wanted to say about our product. And I feel like...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
How did you go about testing the results?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that we test for biodegradability is we're using standard test methods that are developed by ASTM and ISO test methods that measure true biodegradation of materials in various environments. We're choosing test methods that are simulating environments where these fibers that come off of our textiles end up as pollutants. So we're looking at wastewater treatment plant sludge. I mentioned earlier that it's pretty well documented that fibers are coming off in the wash. They wind up at a wastewater treatment plant where they go into the sludge. Mm-hmm. And that sludge then is sometimes sent to landfill as a cover. Sometimes it's incinerated. And about half the time it's going to fields and used as fertilizer. So anything that's in there is going into the environment. So we're looking at wastewater sludge. We're looking at soil. Our soil is littered with these synthetic fibers. And then also seawater, so like natural seawater conditions. And then also anaerobic landfill conditions. And that would be like a biologically active landfill. And landfill, I might mention, sometimes people will say, well, nothing ever biodegrades in a landfill. And there are some landfills that are incredibly dry, and they are intended to be like tombs with no biodegradation. So if you have a wool sweater in one of those, it's not going to biodegrade. And if you have a CiCLO polyester in one of those, it's not going to biodegrade. But there are many landfill that are well managed also, that biodegradation can occur. And in those well-managed landfills, the gases are captured and used for energy. Sometimes they're powering their own plants. Sometimes it's sold back to the grid. So that's, another environment. So yeah, we do long-term tests with third-party labs. We use third-party labs all over the world with these test methods. And we're always comparing a material made with CiCLO, polyester, or nylon compared to that same material without the CiCLO in it. So we can say, okay, all things equal, how does one compare to another? And, we actually do long-term tests so we can see through to full biodegradation, and then have done additional tests to make sure that there's no microplastics left over that maybe you can't see with the naked eye, but are there. And so we can confirm no microplastics as well.
And the big conversation, it's happening everywhere, microplastics, but for many reasons, a lot of it that there's been a lot of money invested in it is the ocean, right? The plastics and Save Our Oceans and, all the big cleanups. What happens when we get CiCLO product that ends up in saltwater? What is the biodegradability look like in saltwater?
Yeah, so in lab tests, we see that it biodegrades in about under 4 years compared to single-digit biodegradation or none for that same material without CiCLO in it. So it can fully biodegrade in seawater. The time it takes for something to biodegrade, and when I say something, I mean anything that's inherently biodegradable, whether it's a banana peel or cotton or wool or CiCLO polyester, varies based on lots of different environmental factors. So warmer environments will allow faster biodegradation of materials. Colder, for instance, will be longer biodegradation. But comparatively, we see about 4 years versus never in these lab studies. So,
and for those that don't understand biodegradability and plastics, we talk about microparticulates. I think people understand it's just little pieces getting smaller and smaller and smaller as they kind of break up. When we talk about biodegradability, what happens to CiCLO poly as it biodegrades? What does it turn into?
Yeah, so microorganisms that live in the environment just naturally are able to actually break down the molecular structure of the polyester, and then they digest it. And what does it turn into? So microorganisms themselves, when they biodegrade anything, give off carbon dioxide. And then they also, some of the material, let's just say that they're digesting, they're using to build their own cell walls. Just like when we eat food, it's not 100% in, 100% out. We're using some of it to build our own cell walls. Mm-hmm. So it turns into basically dead bug bodies, we can call it. So it's also called biomass. So CO2 and biomass, just completely natural elements, just like when anything else that's natural biodegrades.
That's wonderful.
So fascinating.
And we do get the question a lot, like, oh, well, is this just disintegration? And that is not the case. Yes. It is not just splintering into smaller pieces. And
that's the thing I wanted to make sure everyone is crystal clear about in this case.
Yeah,
so
it's not.
What's next on the horizon for CiCLO?
We've got poly and nylon covered. What's next?
Yeah, we have poly and nylon covered. Well, you mentioned earlier about bio-based materials, which can be of bio-origin, but not necessarily biodegradable. So we are working with some of our manufacturers on combining bio-based nylon, for instance, with CiCLO to have a fully bio-based biodegradable product.
Which is kind of a good reason, a good thing to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're also working on some partnerships with textile-to-textile recyclers so that as the industry is transitioning to recycled textile inputs for these synthetics, they can be made recycled with CiCLO in it and still recyclable. And I actually think that that's kind of the holy grail. And I think it's going to take years to get there.
Are you upping my holy grail comment? I'll see you the holy grail and up you one. I'll raise that.
That's the holy grail. Yeah. But it really is, I think. It's going to take so many different solutions to solve these problems with synthetics. Yeah. And certainly using textile inputs for our polyester and nylon fibers makes a whole lot of sense. 10 years ago, I didn't believe that we would ever get to that point. I really didn't. But now we have extended producer responsibility, and that's in Europe, but then it passed recently also in California. What happens in California is going to happen throughout the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. We see really neat things happening, like the Goodwill collaborating with waste management and looking at that infrastructure, making sure we have the right sorting to be able to recycle our textiles appropriately, resale when it's appropriate, recycle when it's appropriate. And, I think it makes a lot of sense to be doing that so we have source reduction of virgin synthetics. So we're working on all of those things. And I do think that that's also another benefit of the CiCLO technology versus some of the other, novel materials that are coming out, is that it really works with any of the synthetics, no matter what the base polymer is.
PET?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Everything.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well,
Yeah.
that's just wonderful.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us today and having the conversation of the holy grails of our industry,
Yeah.
right?
The grails. Yeah.
All the grails. We welcome them all.
Yeah. Well, thanks for helping to spread the message about CiCLO. So,
of
as you
course,
said,
of
it's
course.
super important.
We'll continue to do so. We also have our next issue of Clothing Coulture magazine ready to come out to market, and we have an article on CiCLO in that magazine. So for more information,
Excellent.
you can take a look at that as well.
For those people that are interested in getting access to CiCLO fabrics and the CiCLO conversation, how do you suggest they reach out?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me directly. So
We'll give
Andrea,
her personal cell phone number at the end
well,
of this
I would give my
conversation.
personal email, but you can also reach out to us through our website at CiCLOtextiles.com, where there's a lot of information about the things I've covered here today and our testing, and also a way to contact us so that our sales team can help build the right map of suppliers so that any brand can really integrate this pretty easily into their own supply chains.
Wonderful.
We'll make sure to include that information in our show notes as well. So,
Okay, great.
well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming episodes of Clothing Coulture.